The clock on the wall ticked loudly in the silence. I sat at the dining room table, the stack of papers in front of me like a time bomb. Across from me, Laura, my wife of 15 years, fidgeted with her wedding band. To her left sat Robert, my best friend since childhood. He wasn't his usual cocky self. His hands were clasped tightly in front of him, his jaw clenched. I leaned back in my chair, the legs scraping against the floor, and let my eyes drift between them. "Are you going to come clean, or should I start?" I said, my voice low and cold. Laura froze, her face going pale. Robert shifted uncomfortably, his gaze darting between me and the door like he wanted to bolt. "John, I don't know what you think you found," Robert began, his voice uneven, but I didn't let him finish. "Don't. Just, don't." My hand fell on the papers, and I slid them across the table toward them. "You want to explain this? Or should I?" Laura's trembling hand reached for the papers, but she stopped short, like they might burn her. "John, please, whatever this is, we can talk about it," she whispered. "Read it," I said, my voice sharper now. "Go ahead. You know what it says." Robert's eyes flicked to the papers, and I saw the recognition there. He turned his gaze to the floor. "Paternity test results," I said, breaking the silence. "They're not up for interpretation, Laura. They're black and white." Her lips quivered as she glanced at Robert, and that was all the confirmation I needed. "Tyler and Emily," I said, my chest tightening with each word. "They're not mine." Laura's hand flew to her mouth, and a choked sob escaped her. "Go ahead," I pressed, leaning forward. "Tell me how my best friend is their father. Tell me how you lied to me for years, both of you." "John, it's not what you think," Robert stammered, finally finding his voice. "Not what I think." I shot back, my voice rising. "So, what? The tests are wrong. The labs mixed up the results. You want me to believe this is just one big misunderstanding?" "Please," Laura said, her voice trembling. "Let me explain." "Explain what, Laura?" I said, cutting her off. "Explain how you've been lying to me for 4 years. How you let me believe those kids were mine. How you looked me in the eye every day and said nothing." She buried her face in her hands, sobbing, but I didn't stop. "And you," I said, turning to Robert. He flinched, but I didn't care. "You've been in my life since we were kids. You were there when I met Laura. You were at our wedding, for God's sake. And all the while, you were stabbing me in the back." "John, listen, No," I barked, slamming my hand on the table. "You don't get to talk, Rob. Not yet. You don't get to say anything until she does." I turned back to Laura, my chest heaving. "How long?" Her sobs quieted, but she kept her head down. "For years," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. My stomach churned. "For years," I repeated, shaking my head. "That means Emily," I couldn't finish the sentence. "I didn't mean for it to happen," Laura said, finally meeting my gaze. Her eyes were bloodshot, her face streaked with tears. "It wasn't supposed to go this far. I swear, John, I didn't mean for." "Don't," I snapped. "Don't insult me by pretending this was some accident. You don't just accidentally destroy a marriage, Laura." She opened her mouth to speak, but I wasn't finished. "You didn't just hurt me," I said, my voice breaking. "You hurt the kids. You hurt them in ways they don't even understand yet." Laura's sobs grew louder, but I turned my attention back to Robert. "And you? Were you planning to tell me? Or were you just going to let me keep raising your kids while you played the good friend?" Robert's face was ashen. "John, I'm sorry," he said weakly. "Sorry?" I repeated, laughing bitterly. "You're sorry. That's what you've got. You betray me, destroy my family, and all you can say is sorry." The room was silent except for Laura's muffled sobs. I stood slowly, my hands trembling as I gripped the back of my chair. "You want to fix this?" I said finally. "Fine. Here's how this works, I'm going to fight for those kids. They're my kids, no matter what those papers say. And you're going to pay, Rob. You're going to pay for every lie, every stolen moment, every ounce of pain you've caused." I turned and walked out of the room, leaving them in stunned silence. The air outside was cold, biting, but it felt better than staying in that room a second longer. My world had shattered, but the fight was just beginning. Laura buried her face in her hands, her shoulders trembling as sobs racked her body. It wasn't supposed to happen this way. What way? I snapped, my voice cold and steady. The way where you lied to your husband. The way where you let me believe Tyler and Emily were mine. Or the way you laughed behind my back with him. She shook her head, choking out a response between her sobs. It wasn't like that. You were always gone, John. You were so focused on work, on your projects, on everything except me. And that's your excuse. I leaned forward, my hands gripping the edge of the table. You cheated because I was busy providing for this family. Because I was out working to give us a life. Her sobs grew quieter, but she didn't answer. And you, I said, turning my glare to Robert. He flinched but didn't look away. You're supposed to be my best friend. The guy who has my back, who I can trust. How could you? John, Robert interrupted, his voice low and shaky. I swear, man, I never wanted this to happen. Then why did it? I barked, slamming my hand on the table. The sound echoed in the room, making Laura flinch. Affairs don't just happen. Somebody made the first move. So tell me, Rob, was it you, or was it her? Laura straightened slightly, her face pale but determined. It was me, she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. I froze for a moment, disbelief flooding my chest. You, I repeated, the word heavy in the air. Why? Tears streamed down her cheeks as she looked away, unable to meet my gaze. I was lonely, John. You were always gone, always working. I felt invisible, and Robert, he was there. He listened to me. I stared at her, the weight of her words sinking in like a stone. So that's it, I said, my voice trembling with restrained fury. You were lonely, and instead of talking to me, instead of trying to fix things, you turned to him. I jabbed a finger at Robert. To my best friend. It wasn't like that, she protested, her voice cracking. It wasn't about hurting you. I didn't want to hurt you. But you did, I interrupted. You both did. You didn't just hurt me, Laura. You destroyed everything. Our marriage, our family, our life, you burned it all to the ground. Robert finally spoke, his voice trembling. John, I swear, I never meant for this to go so far. I didn't think. You didn't think. I spat. No, Rob, you did think. You thought about how to sneak around, how to keep me in the dark. You thought about yourself, not about the consequences. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by Laura's muffled sobs. I leaned back in my chair, trying to steady the storm raging inside me. How long? I asked finally, my voice low and even. What? Laura looked up, her eyes red and puffy. How long? I repeated, my gaze boring into hers. How long has this been going on? She hesitated, her lips trembling. For years, she admitted. My breath caught in my throat. For years. Every anniversary, every family photo, every bedtime story with Tyler and Emily, all of it had been a lie. And the kids? I forced the words out, even though I already knew the answer. She hesitated again, but her silence said it all. They're his, aren't they? I asked, my voice shaking. Laura covered her face, sobbing uncontrollably. I didn't mean for it to happen. I swear, John, I didn't. My chest felt like it was caving in, but I clenched my fists, refusing to let them see me break. Well, congratulations, Rob, I said bitterly, turning to him. You're not just a liar and a cheat, you're a father. Twice over. Robert's face turned ghostly pale. John, please. Please what? I shot back. Please forgive you. Please let this go. That's not happening, Rob. You're going to pay for this, both of you are. The days after that confrontation were a blur of anger, hurt, and a relentless drive to protect what mattered most, Tyler and Emily. I couldn't change the fact that they weren't biologically mine, but they were still my kids. I had been there for every scraped knee, every bedtime story, every laugh and tear. No piece of paper was going to take that away from me. Laura and Robert? They weren't walking away clean. Not after the lies, the betrayal, and the mess they left in their wake. I called Karen the next day. Karen was the kind of lawyer who didn't pull punches. Sharp as a razor and tough as nails, she laid out the stakes without sugarcoating a thing. You've got a good chance for primary custody, she said, flipping through the paternity test results and evidence I had collected. The affair, the deception, and the fact that you've been the kid's sole emotional and financial support, all of that works in your favor. But you need to be prepared for a fight. Let them bring it, I said firmly. Those kids are my life. I won't lose them. Karen leaned back, studying me. What about Robert? Are you prepared to go after him for child support? I hesitated for just a moment. The thought of taking Robert to court felt like dragging a knife across a wound that was still fresh. But then I thought of Tyler's soccer cleats, Emily's art supplies, the thousands of ways I had invested in those kids, ways I would keep investing for years to come. Robert might have sired them, but I'd been their father. Yes, I said. If the law says he's responsible, then he's paying. He doesn't get to walk away from this scot-free. Karen nodded, her sharp gaze softening just slightly. Good. Because we'll need to be ruthless. The courtroom was sterile and unwelcoming, a cold stage for the drama that was about to unfold. Laura sat across from me, her face pale and drawn. She looked at me once, her eyes pleading, but I didn't flinch. She'd made her choices. Karen began laying out our case with precision. The paternity test results were the cornerstone, proving that Robert was the biological father of both Tyler and Emily. Then came the affair, a sordid tale backed by emails, texts, and even a timeline of their late-night rendezvous. These children may not be biologically his, Karen argued, her voice steady and firm. But John has been their father in every way that matters. He has provided for them financially, emotionally, and physically. He has been the constant in their lives, while their mother chose deception over honesty. Laura's lawyer countered, painting her as a devoted mother who had made a mistake but still deserved to raise her children. She has been an integral part of their lives, her lawyer said. Removing them from their mother's care would cause undue harm to the children. Karen didn't back down. Harm, she shot back. Mrs. Carter chose to prioritize her affair over her family. She not only lied to her husband but let him believe he was the biological father of children who were not his. Mr. Carter has been these children's father in every meaningful way. To him, they are not just names on a piece of paper, they are his family. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with sharp eyes, leaned forward. Mrs. Carter, the court takes these matters very seriously. You've admitted to the affair, and the paternity tests leave no doubt about the biological parentage of these children. How do you propose to explain this to them? Laura hesitated, her lips trembling. I don't know, she said finally, her voice breaking. The judge nodded grimly. That's what I thought. After hours of arguments, the judge made her ruling. I was granted temporary custody, with Laura receiving supervised visitation. Laura gasped, her face crumpling. I sat still, my expression blank, but inside, I felt a wave of relief. The next fight was with Robert. Karen filed for child support on my behalf, using the paternity results as leverage. Robert arrived at the hearing looking like a man on his way to a firing squad. You're asking me to pay child support for kids John is raising, he said incredulously. They're your kids, Mr. Adams, Karen said coolly. The court doesn't care who's raising them, it cares about who's responsible for them. And as their biological father, you have a legal obligation. Robert turned to me, his expression a mix of guilt and desperation. John, man, come on. We can work this out. You don't have to do this. I stared at him, my voice ice cold. You mean like how you worked things out when you were sneaking around with my wife? When you let me believe they were mine? No, Rob. You don't get to talk your way out of this. His lawyer tried to argue that Robert had no meaningful relationship with the kids, that his financial obligations should be minimal. But Karen was relentless, pointing out that his lack of involvement was a direct result of his own choices. In the end, the court ruled in our favor. Robert was ordered to pay monthly child support, enough to cover a significant portion of Tyler and Emily's needs. It wasn't about the money, it never was. But it felt like justice, a small way to hold him accountable for what he'd done. At home, I sat Tyler and Emily down to explain things as gently as I could. Mom and I are going to live in different houses, I said, keeping my voice calm. But I want you to know something very important, none of this is your fault. Not even a little bit. I love you both so much, and that's never going to change. Tyler frowned, his small brow furrowed. Is Mom mad at us? No, buddy, I said, pulling him close. This isn't about you. It's about grown-up stuff. But no matter what, I'm always going to be here for you. Okay. Emily climbed into my lap, her tiny arms wrapping around my neck. Okay, Daddy, she said softly. Hearing her call me, Daddy, even after everything, was all the reassurance I needed. The house felt emptier these days, quieter. The space Laura left behind seemed to echo louder than I expected, even with Tyler and Emily filling the rooms with their usual laughter. But I didn't have time to dwell on the silence, there was too much to do, too many battles still ahead. Karen, my lawyer, had been relentless. Her confidence and determination gave me hope, even when it felt like the odds were stacked against me. She hadn't just fought to win custody, she'd gone after Robert too, pushing for him to take full financial responsibility for the kids he had fathered. This isn't going to be an easy process, John, Karen had warned me during one of our meetings. Robert's lawyer will argue that he has no emotional connection to the kids, no active role in their lives. They'll claim he shouldn't be on the hook for child support. I had nodded, my jaw tight with resolve. I don't care how hard it gets. He's their biological father. He should be paying for them. Karen gave me a thin smile, her sharp eyes gleaming. Good. Then let's make it happen. The day we went to court for child support, Robert looked more disheveled than I had ever seen him. He was usually the polished one, the guy who never showed up without a crisp shirt and a confident smirk. But today, he looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. John, he said quietly as we waited for the judge to enter. I didn't respond. Come on, man, he pressed, his voice low. We don't have to do this. We can settle this between us. I turned to him, my expression cold. Settle it? Like you settled things when you decided to sleep with my wife. Like you settled things when you let me believe Tyler and Emily were mine. No, Rob. We're not settling. You're going to pay. Before he could respond, the judge entered, and the hearing began. Karen presented the paternity test results, the timeline of the affair, and detailed records of the expenses I'd shouldered raising Tyler and Emily. She argued that Robert, as the biological father, had a legal obligation to contribute financially to their upbringing, regardless of the circumstances. Robert's lawyer tried to counter, claiming that he had no meaningful relationship with the children and that forcing him to pay child support would only create unnecessary complications. But Karen was ready for every argument, dismantling their case piece by piece. These children deserve stability, she said firmly, addressing the judge. They deserve to be cared for by the people responsible for bringing them into this world. John Carter has stepped up in every way, providing for them emotionally, physically, and financially. But Robert Adams cannot simply walk away from his obligations. He is their biological father, and the law requires him to support them. The judge listened intently, her sharp gaze flicking between Karen, Robert, and me. Finally, she nodded and delivered her ruling. Mr. Adams, she said, her voice firm, you are hereby ordered to pay monthly child support for Tyler and Emily Carter. This amount will be determined based on your income and calculated to meet their needs. Furthermore, this obligation will continue until the children reach the age of majority. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Robert sat there, stunned, his shoulders slumping as if the weight of the decision had finally crushed him. In the weeks that followed, Laura drifted further away. Her supervised visits with the kids became fewer and farther between, until one day, she simply stopped coming. The last time we spoke, it was on the phone. She didn't even have the courage to say it to my face. I think it's better this way, John, she said, her voice soft but hollow. The kids will be better off with you. They deserve better than this, Laura, I replied, anger simmering under my words. They deserve a mother who cares enough to show up. I'm doing what's best for them, she said quietly. And for me. She hung up before I could respond. Tyler and Emily noticed, of course. They were too smart not to. Tyler asked fewer and fewer questions about his mom, while Emily kept drawing pictures of her, a mom in a house far away, always with a little heart in the corner. Months passed, and life settled into a new normal. Robert's child support payments came in regularly, covering Tyler's soccer fees, Emily's art classes, and the countless little things that made up their lives. One night, as I was tucking Emily into bed, she looked up at me with those big, curious eyes of hers. Daddy, she said softly, are you sad about Mom? I paused, caught off guard by the question. Why do you ask, sweetheart? She shrugged, fiddling with the corner of her blanket. I just wonder if you miss her. Like I do sometimes. I sat on the edge of her bed, brushing a strand of hair from her face. It's okay to miss her, I said gently. But I want you to know something. No matter what happens, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. Okay. She nodded, her small arms wrapping around my neck. Okay, Daddy. I love you. I love you too, sweetheart, I whispered, holding her close. The life I thought I'd have was gone, replaced by something new. It wasn't easy, but it was mine. And as I watched Tyler score his first goal at his soccer game the next weekend, with Emily cheering loudly beside me, I realized something. We were going to be okay. The house was quiet that evening. Tyler and Emily were upstairs, their laughter trickling down faintly as they played together. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the child support check that had arrived in the mail. Robert's name was scrawled in the corner, but it might as well have been written in stone. This wasn't just money, it was accountability, a small piece of justice in the mess they had left behind. I wasn't naive. No check could undo the hurt, the betrayal, or the lies. But every dollar went toward the lives of the two people who mattered most, my kids. Laura's absence had become the new normal. After months of sporadic supervised visits, she had finally stopped coming altogether. The last time I heard from her was a text message sent late one night. I'm sorry, John. I can't keep hurting them. Please take care of them. That was it. No explanation. No goodbye. She had chosen her path, and that path didn't include Tyler and Emily. I struggled with anger at first, anger for what she had done, for the damage she'd caused, for leaving the kids to wonder why their mother wasn't around. But that anger dulled over time, replaced by a resolve to be everything they needed. Months turned into years. The first few were the hardest, filled with awkward questions and tough conversations. Emily would climb into my lap with one of her drawings, another picture of her mom in a faraway house, always smiling, always with a heart nearby. Do you think she misses us, Daddy? She'd ask, her big eyes searching mine. She does, I'd say, even though I wasn't sure if it was true. It was the answer she needed, and I would give her that comfort. Tyler, on the other hand, stopped talking about Laura altogether. He buried himself in soccer and school, his determination to succeed clear in everything he did. I made sure to be at every game, cheering him on as loud as I could. Robert's role in our lives was strictly financial, and I made sure it stayed that way. His payments came regularly, but his presence never did. He had moved on with Laura, building a life far away from us. For a while, I wondered if Tyler or Emily would ask about him, but they never did. Karen had warned me early on that this would be a long road. You're doing this for them, John, she'd said, her tone firm but kind. And they'll thank you for it someday, even if they don't realize it now. I clung to those words on the hard days, when the weight of single parenthood felt like too much. But Karen was right. Slowly, the cracks in our little family began to heal. One sunny Saturday, a few years after the dust had settled, I took Tyler and Emily to the park. Tyler had his soccer ball, and Emily had her sketchbook, her hands already smudged with charcoal before we even got there. Dad, watch this. Tyler called, kicking the ball with practiced precision. I clapped and cheered as it sailed into the net, his grin lighting up his whole face. Nice one, buddy. I called back. Emily tugged on my sleeve, holding up her latest masterpiece. It was a picture of the three of us, me, Tyler, and her, standing together under a bright sun. What do you think? She asked, her voice hopeful. It's perfect, I said, pulling her into a hug. Can we hang it on the fridge? She asked, beaming. Of course, I said. It deserves the best spot. As the afternoon stretched on, I sat on the bench, watching them play. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace. This wasn't the life I had planned, but it was the life I had now, and it was enough. That night, as I tucked Emily into bed, she looked up at me with those big, curious eyes of hers. Daddy, are you happy? She asked softly. The question caught me off guard. I thought about everything we'd been through, the lies, the betrayals, the heartbreak, and then about the moments like this one, the quiet warmth of being here with my kids. I smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Yeah, sweetheart. I am. She hugged me tightly, her small arms wrapping around my neck. I'm glad, she said. Life didn't magically fix itself after what Laura and Robert did. The scars of their choices would always be there, faint reminders of what had been lost. But those scars didn't define me. They didn't define Tyler or Emily. We found our own way forward, together. And in the end, that was all that mattered.